Last night the president spoke, and today the world is reacting. Welcome to the Sand Table. This is Briefing 7. First of all, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the new briefings. 24 hours ago in Briefing 6, I told you what was coming. I told you about the F-22 Raptors landing in Israel, the Gang of Eight briefing, the CIA's Farsi video. I told you all of it before the president walked into that chamber. Tonight I'm going to tell you what he actually said, and more importantly, what happened today because of it. Let's start with last night. President Trump delivered the longest State of the Union address in American history, 1 hour and 48 minutes. He broke Bill Clinton's record by 20 minutes. Most of the speech was domestic. Economy, immigration, Democrats. Democrats heckled back. Ilhan Omar shouted at him. Rashida Tlaib called him a liar. Al Green held up a sign and got ejected from the chamber for the second year in a row. But we don't cover that here. We cover what matters to the crisis. 90 minutes into the speech, Trump turned to Iran, and in roughly 4 minutes, he laid out the clearest case yet for military action. 3 things he said that matter. First, he claimed Iran is rebuilding its nuclear weapons program, his exact framing. We wiped it out, and they want to start all over again. They are at this moment again pursuing their sinister ambitions. This is the first time the president explicitly accused Iran of restarting enrichment activity after Operation Midnight Hammer last June. Second, he claimed Iran is developing ballistic missiles that will soon be capable of reaching the United States mainland. Not Europe, not bases overseas, the homeland. No evidence was presented. But the claim itself is the signal, because that language moves the justification from regional threat to national security threat. That changes the legal and political calculus entirely. Third, and this is the line that will define the next 48 hours, he said, "They want to make a deal, but we haven't heard those secret words. We will never have a nuclear weapon." Then he added, "My preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy, but one thing is certain. I will never allow the #1 state sponsor of terrorism to have a nuclear weapon. Diplomacy first. But force is loaded and ready." One more thing from that briefing room. After the Gang of Eight meeting I told you about yesterday, Congressman Jim Himes, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, walked out and said this: "We have not heard articulated a single good reason for why now is the moment to launch yet another war in the Middle East." That's a ranking Intelligence Committee member. That tells you what the classified briefing felt like. Now we move to what might be the most significant development of the day, and almost nobody is talking about it. Hezbollah, Iran's most powerful proxy force, just told the world it will not fight. A senior Hezbollah official told AFP today, "In the event of limited U.S. strikes on Iran, Hezbollah's position will be to not intervene militarily." Let that sink in. For 40 years, the entire architecture of Iranian deterrence has rested on one principle. If you hit Iran, its proxies hit back. Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Iraq, Houthis in Yemen. That's the so-called axis of resistance. That's been the shield. Today, the shield cracked. Now there's a caveat. The official said Hezbollah would intervene if the United States tries to provoke the downfall of the Iranian regime or target Supreme Leader Khamenei directly. That's their red line. Regime change, they fight. Limited strikes on military targets, they stay home. Why does this matter? Because it answers the question every military planner in the Pentagon has been asking for months. If we hit Iran, does this become a regional war? Hezbollah just said no, at least not for limited strikes. And there's context behind this. Hezbollah got devastated in 2024. Israel killed most of its senior leadership. The pager operation, the Beirut strikes, the ground invasion into southern Lebanon. Hezbollah's military capacity is a fraction of what it was 2 years ago. They know that if they jump in, Israel has already told Lebanon, through indirect channels, that they will hit civilian infrastructure hard, including Beirut's airport. Lebanon's own Prime Minister Nawaf Salam publicly urged Hezbollah this week not to drag the country into, his words, another adventure. Lebanon's foreign minister said in Geneva, "This war does not concern us." Iran's most important ally just took itself off the battlefield. The strategic implications of that are enormous. If you're sitting in the Pentagon, your risk calculation just changed dramatically. A limited strike on Iran no longer automatically means a multi-front regional war. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking toward Geneva. Tomorrow, Thursday, February 26th, The third round of U.S.-Iran nuclear talks begins in Geneva. Iran's delegation, led by Foreign Minister Araghchi, has already left Tehran. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are heading the American side. But today, the United States did something interesting. The Treasury Department rolled out a fresh wave of sanctions. More than 30 individuals, entities, and vessels connected to illicit Iranian oil sales and weapons procurement. Maximum pressure, the day before you sit down to negotiate. Vice President Vance spoke publicly today and confirmed what the intelligence community has been saying privately. We've seen evidence that they have tried to rebuild their nuclear program. He added, "The principle is very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If they try to rebuild one, that causes problems for us." Iran's response? The foreign ministry called Trump's claims big lies and accused the United States and Israel of using, their words, Goebbels-like propaganda tactics. Araghchi dismissed Trump's missile claims entirely, saying Iran has capped its missile range at 2,000 kilometers and is not developing intercontinental capability. So you have two sides walking into the same room tomorrow with completely opposite narratives. One side says you're building nuclear weapons. The other side says you're lying. The question is whether there's enough room between those positions for a deal, or whether Geneva is just the last diplomatic checkpoint before something else begins. Now I need to take you away from the Middle East for a moment because something happened today that nobody expected, and it could escalate fast. This morning, Cuban border guard forces opened fire on a Florida-registered speedboat in Cuban territorial waters. 4 people on that boat are dead. 6 more are wounded. 1 Cuban officer was also wounded. Here's what we know. The boat, a 24-foot Proline Florida registration number FL7726SH, was detected about 1 nautical mile northeast of the El Pino Channel, near Cayo Falcones, off Cuba's north-central coast in Villa Clara province. Cuba's Interior Ministry says a 5-man border patrol unit approached the vessel for identification. According to Havana, the crew on the American boat opened fire first, wounding the Cuban patrol commander. Cuban forces returned fire. 4 dead, 6 wounded on the American vessel. Now, we don't know who was on that boat. We don't know if they were U.S. citizens. We don't know what they were doing in Cuban waters. Could have been smugglers, could have been migrants, could have been activists connected to Cuban exile networks in South Florida. We don't know yet. What we do know is the political reaction. Florida's Attorney General James Uthmeier immediately launched an investigation. His statement, "The Cuban government cannot be trusted, and we will do everything in our power to hold these communists accountable." Congressman Carlos Jimenez, himself born in Havana, called it a massacre and demanded an immediate investigation to determine if any of the victims were U.S. citizens or residents. Vice President Vance confirmed he's been briefed on the incident. Secretary of State Rubio, here's where it gets interesting, was in the Caribbean at the time. He was attending a CARICOM summit in St. Kitts and Nevis. He confirmed that the U.S. Coast Guard is responding and said the United States will investigate and respond accordingly. Now, why does this matter beyond the immediate tragedy? Because the U.S.-Cuba relationship was already at its worst point in decades. Trump declared a national emergency over Cuba earlier this year. He's imposed tariffs on nations that supply oil to the regime. Relations were frozen, and now you have dead bodies in the water between Florida and Havana. If any of those 4 dead are confirmed as American citizens, this becomes a major escalation. Not on the scale of Iran, but it opens a second front of political pressure on an administration already managing the biggest military buildup in the Middle East since Iraq. And here's the strategic question nobody's asking yet. Cuba has historically relied on 2 backers, Russia and Venezuela. Maduro is gone. Russia is bogged down in Ukraine. Cuba is more isolated than it's been in 60 years. And now they've killed people on an American-flagged boat. I'll be watching this one closely. If U.S. citizens are confirmed among the dead, expect this to move fast. Back to the Middle East. Today, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi landed in Israel for a 2-day state visit. And the timing tells you everything. Modi arrived at Ben Gurion Airport this morning, welcomed by Netanyahu on the red carpet. This is Modi's second visit to Israel. His first was in 2017. But the world has changed since then. Today, Modi became the first Indian Prime Minister in history to address the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. In his speech, he called Israel a protective wall against barbarism and stressed the importance of a strong defense partnership between India and Israel. Now here's why this matters for our story. Remember what I told you in Briefing 6? Netanyahu told the Shin Bet conference that Israel is building a new regional alliance, what he's now calling a hexagon, to counter both Iranian and Sunni extremist threats. He said this alliance includes many countries, some visiting Israel, some being visited by Israel. An entire circle encompassing the Middle East. Here's the moment to zoom out. While Modi stood at the Knesset podium today, 12 American F-22 Raptors sat on the tarmac at Ovda Air Base less than 200 miles south. The USS Gerald Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, is docked at a NATO base on Crete, preparing to move east. 300 American military aircraft are positioned across the region. And into this picture walks the leader of the world's most populous democracy, standing next to the Israeli Prime Minister, calling for a stronger alliance. That's not an accident, that's a message. And the message is aimed directly at Tehran. The walls are closing in. Let me give you the updated picture on the military buildup because it's moved again since yesterday. Yesterday I told you 11 F-22 Raptors made it to Ovda Air Base in Israel, with one turning back to Lakenheath due to a mechanical issue. Today, open-source flight trackers confirmed a second wave. 6 more F-22s took off from the United States, heading toward RAF Lakenheath in England. They're staging there before continuing to the Middle East, and there may be another 6 coming behind them. If that holds, the total F-22 deployment could reach 24 aircraft. To put that in perspective, the U.S. Air Force has 143 combat-coded Raptors in its entire fleet. 24 would be nearly 17% of the entire force. You don't send 17% of your most classified air superiority platform to one theater for a diplomatic exercise. Meanwhile, the USS Gerald Ford, 100,000 tons, 4,500 crew, the most expensive warship ever built at $13 billion, is resupplying at Suda Bay on Crete and will move east within days. It joins the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group already on station in the Sea of Aden. That's 2 full carrier strike groups, 14 warships, and over 150 carrier-based aircraft. And a detail that hasn't gotten enough attention, the U.S. deployed F-16 fighters to Diego Garcia, the remote island base in the Indian Ocean. Why? Because Diego Garcia is within range of Iranian ballistic missiles, and the Pentagon wants fighter cover there in case Iran tries to hit American basing infrastructure in retaliation. Turkey is quietly preparing too. Bloomberg reported that Ankara has updated contingency plans for mass refugee flows, specifically Afghan and Pakistani nationals living inside Iran, in the event of a major military conflict. They're planning border camps and even scenarios for entering Iranian territory to manage displacement. Now, let me pull all of today together the way I do. February 25th, 2026. Here's what happened in one day. Last night, the president gave the longest State of the Union address in history and laid the public case for military action against Iran. This morning, Hezbollah announced it would not fight if U.S. strikes are limited, removing the biggest variable from the Pentagon's risk calculation. A Florida-registered boat was shot up by Cuban forces, 4 dead, 6 wounded, opening an unexpected second crisis. India's prime minister became the first Indian leader to address the Israeli parliament, calling for a stronger alliance while American stealth fighters sat on the tarmac nearby. The U.S. Treasury slapped new sanctions on more than 30 Iranian entities, the day before nuclear talks. A second wave of F-22 Raptors began moving toward the Middle East, with the total potentially reaching 24 aircraft. The vice president confirmed the U.S. has evidence Iran is trying to rebuild its nuclear program. And Iran's delegation left Tehran for Geneva, where tomorrow the third round of talks will determine whether this crisis ends at a negotiating table or on a battlefield. I've been doing these briefings for a week now. I've never seen a single day this dense. Every lever, military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, political, is being pulled simultaneously. And all of it converges tomorrow in Geneva. Briefing 8 will break down what happens there. Subscribe so you don't miss it. This is the Sand Table. I'll see you tomorrow.